Because Dynasty has pretty much come back to life in the last couple weeks, it's now important to be focusing on what the plan is for your team this year. What do you plan to do? Do you plan to rebuild? Do you plan to contend? What's your 3-year outlook? So what are you planning for the future as well? What type of team do you have? What is your team archetype? These are all the most important questions to ask yourself as we go into this season, because all of the trades and all of the deals and all of the moves that you make right now are going to impact what your goals are with your team. And so let's talk about that. Number one, like I mentioned, people are making moves. We had a trade video last week. We talked about some of the trades. Go check it out if you haven't already. Some of the trades that we've been making and we've seen other people making, and things are really starting to heat up. Our Dynasty leagues are actually active again. It's really nice. But I can't stress this enough. People need to have a plan in place for their team this year. Right? People need to know, okay, and you, a lot of times you have, there's the exception. You have these middle-of-the-road teams where you're like, with my Dynasty team, I don't really know if I'm contending. I don't really know if I'm rebuilding this year. So I'm going to kind of take my young, somewhat productive team into this year and see what they do, and then I'll kind of pivot mid-season, which is a totally reasonable approach. But even that type of team has certain moves that you should be making right now, because with that type of team, you definitely don't want to sell your 25 first, right? And so we got to give you kind of what we think each type of team should do. We're going to break this out by our 3-year outlook and by our team archetype that we give on our team blueprints. And again, the moves that you make need to reflect what your 3-year outlook is. The moves for a dual elite QB with a rebuild contend are going to be completely different than a dual elite QB with a contend reload, right? And so even though you have the same team archetype, it's all about that 3-year outlook. It's all about what you want to do. And again, 1-year reloads, what are you actually planning for? You're planning to compete next year, right? And so your moves have to reflect a team that's planning on competing next year, that wants to compete next year, but also the value portfolio reflects that of which needs to be in a certain spot next year to be able to compete. And so let's talk about that as well. First of all, let's introduce you to the DBC, the domain blueprint code. This is one of the new features on our brand new Blueprint 2.0, and it basically tells you a couple things here. The first 2 digits of this code are going to tell you your team archetype. So in this example right here, this is an elite value team archetype. So it says EV, and elite value basically is the top of our DVM if you're familiar with some of our Dynasty concepts, and it is basically you have the best of the best. So this is what we give the best teams we see. We don't give it out that often, but this is a team where you have really good value at every single position, so much so that you could pretty much do whatever you want, and the absolute goal year after year after year is going to be to win your league, because a lot of times we see elite value in home leagues or in leagues where somebody struck gold on Puka and then struck gold on Amon-Ra a couple of years before that and struck gold on Purdy in the rookie draft or got him off of waivers, right? Those are the type of teams we see here. So that's an elite value. So the first 2 digits, that can be elite value, can be WR for well-rounded. It's going to tell you your team archetype. And then the next 3 digits are going to tell you your 3-year outlook. And so the C obviously is for contend, the R is for rebuild, the O is for reload. And between those 3 digits, you can kind of come up with what you're going to be doing for your Dynasty team for the next 3 years. And this is really important. Why? Because in this particular example, again, an elite value team is probably going to contend because they have the value to do whatever they want. When you have that value, you contend, right? When you can, you contend. That's the rule. And so with this, a lot of times what we focus on are having C's in this first column. But if you don't have a C in this first column, you are going to need to focus on making different types of moves than if you do. And we're going to go into some of those moves here today. But again, those 3 digits are going to tell you what the next 3 years of your team should look like. So you're going to know on this particular example, in the 3rd year from now, I'm going to be reloading. You need to be planning accordingly. That means you're not going and getting guys that have 2-year shelf lives, right? A good example of this, I'm not going and trading for Amari Cooper on this team probably. If I've got an elite value team, I know Amari Cooper's probably not going to be around 3 years from now, 4 years from now when I have to reload, right? And so again, and then the next 2 digits after that are how many teams are in your league, which is really important contextually for,
upside players versus floor and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. For quarterbacks especially. And then the next thing is quarterback only. It's either SF or Superflex or 1Q for 1QB. Shout out to our 1QB peeps. But again, how do you know what your team is before we even get into this? You either can try to deduce it yourself, which I go for it. We've released a lot of videos on team archetypes. We've a lot of video on 3-year outlooks, or you can just get a team blueprint. And again, this code is brand new on our brand new product, Team Blueprint 2.0, which features a ton of new, increased, and better sections from Blueprint 1.0. It builds on all the good things. It builds on the cornerstone assets, the suggested moves, the positional grids, and all that. But for the suggested moves, you get 3 sells, you get 6 buys. We really want to give you a wide variety of options. We tie those to specific players. You get more in-depth draft capital analysis. You get a new hold section. Positional grades has been reworked. You get market value analysis for your team all across the board. You get league rankings for how your different position groups stack up in your leagues. And you also get the blueprint code, which again, this is going to be, it's like a personality test, right? You ever done one of those stupid personality tests with the codes and you're like, yeah, I'm a blank, blank, dash, blank, blank. That's exactly what this was designed. That's what I had in mind. I'm like, this is a personality code for football nerds. And so get one of these at flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain when you sign up. Choose the Motherflocker tier. You get 30% off a Team Blueprint 2.0 when you're a Motherflocker tier with code domain. So if you want one of those, if you want a regular Team Blueprint, you get one free with the annual tier when you use code domain as well. But like I said, flockfantasy.com/domain to get one of these. And that's the best way for us to do it. It's for Nathan and I to sit down, look at your team, look at your roster, grade your positional groups, and then determine what should you do with the next 3 years of your life in terms of your Dynasty team. And so let's go through and let's talk about, we're going to give you this for free. So if you have gotten a Team Blueprint, we build our content around the advice we give people because we have 600, 700 people who have gotten Team Blueprints now. And so those people, what moves are you supposed to be making? Or if you want to try to guess it yourself, let's start with these 2 up top here. I'll let you kind of go through these codes and the buys associated with them. So
let's start with the outlooks that have rebuild, contend. That's dual elite QB, rebuild, contend. That's future value, rebuild, contend, right? These are teams that have, either, I hate saying it, but punted a year to be competitive for the next couple of seasons. Those are usually your teams that have a ton of rookie draft picks, that have a ton of young players that they just invested in. I cannot tell you how many teams I've seen that have heavily invested in the 2024 draft class, which was a good one to invest in. At least it looks like right now. And they have Caleb Williams in their starting lineup. They have Brian Thomas in their starting lineup. They have Ladd. They have Keon Coleman. They have, Jonathan Brooks and all of these guys. And, you're kind of 50-50 when you're looking at like a contend rebuild scale from left to right, right? You're probably right in the middle. If your rookies really pan out and they are productive in 2024, then you could be a frisky team. You could compete, but you're probably going to be more middle of the pack, maybe even towards the bottom while your young players really, develop in the NFL. So these teams, again, they're either rookie pick heavy or they have already built the foundation of their team in Superflex formats. That's dual elite QB, right? Those are the top 2 QBs that you're starting every single week. That's the foundation of your team. You're safe there. You have Kyler Murray and you have Anthony Richardson. You have Justin Herbert and you have Joe Burrow, right? Those types of builds are incredibly safe, and that's what we recommend when you're on the rebuild trajectory. These guys are just a step ahead, right? They've already done that first step. They've already done the hard work, the legwork of getting that value insulation. So we want you to, once you have that future value or dual elite QB build with a rebuild first year and then contend for the next couple of years, we want you to get more value at the wide receiver position. Let's work on the next foundational position in Dynasty Fantasy Football, and that is wide receiver and even a safe tight end. Justin Jefferson right now for a future value team is not a bad target. It really isn't, because he is being discounted due to J.J. McCarthy being that offense, due to Sam Darnold potentially starting all of this year. He just got a brand new contract. Now, he's a bit pricey, so if you can't afford him or you don't want to offload a ton of rookie picks to go get him, go get some lower-end guys like Rashee Rice and Jaden Reed, who more likely than not are going to increase in value, like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? Just keep looking for more high-value upside shots. Don't target guys that have capped out at their value ceiling, right? You're probably not going to target a Tyreek Hill. We like Tyreek Hill for some targets, but for a future value team, there's not really a reason to target him unless he's already on your team, and then you can offload him at a premium mid-season. But Jonathan Brooks, right? If you're going to be targeting a running back as a future value or a dual elite QB, we want you targeting a rookie running back, a guy like Jonathan Brooks, or we like you targeting guys who are in guaranteed 2 to 3 year situations. So Ramondre Stevenson right now is one of the most affordable options at the running back position that we think is very safe and has a really, really solid 2 to 3 year outlook, and a guy that if you end up not contending this year because you're a little bit younger and in the middle of the season you need to offload some competing pieces at a premium, you can offload Ramondre Stevenson at a premium and you're totally fine. If your team ends up working out and you're more competitive than you thought you were going to be, then Ramondre Stevenson is probably the reason why. So those are some targets there that we recommend for you in that range.
Yeah, let's pivot now to some of our contend reload team archetypes here and 3-year outlooks, and that's going to include dual elite QB, it's going to include elite value, it's going to include wide receiver factory as well.
You can kind of see that range on the DVM.
And you could probably, correct me if I'm wrong, you could probably throw in well-rounded CCOs to this as well, don't you think? Because they're typically going to also have pretty good teams if they're reloading in year 3.
They're just always a little bit on the lower end.
Yeah,
but
so
you could include them.
So for these type of teams, again, these are teams usually when we give in this part of the code, when you're looking at how good is this team, the important part to analyze here is going to be that third digit of the 3-year outlook, because what this tells you is it tells you how good is your roster right now and how much do we believe in your roster long term. If we think, okay, this roster doesn't have a lot of value insulation, doesn't have a lot of picks insulation, they may be traded away there first, we're definitely going to throw an R on there and say you're rebuilding in 3 years and you need to plan accordingly. You don't need to just completely go balls to the wall. But if we think your roster is good enough and it's sustainable enough to give you a reload value there, we're definitely going to do it, because again, reloading is rebuilding, so you don't have to rebuild, right? And so the different types of trade targets go along with this. Tyreek Hill is a good one here, because again, the CC up front is going to be the main thing here. You're contending for the next 2 years. If you are contending for the next 2 years and you still have your draft capital for the third year, assuming you do, if we give you a reload here, Tyreek Hill is going to give you the best shot to win your league. And we talked about this in our video earlier this week, but he's a good trade target right now for people like you saw the trade I made with Rome Odunze last week, where I traded away Rome Odunze and Bo Nix for Tyreek Hill and David Montgomery and Hollywood and a couple other pieces. And the reason I did that is because I know my team is going to be competing at least for the next 2 years. That roster that I did that on is a contend, reload roster. And so I know, I can probably just take the 2 years of Tyreek Hill. I'll reload in year 3, probably still have Tyreek Hill. Either I'll ship him off for something there, or I'll hold him. And in that reload year, maybe I end up contending because I play my value right. But I'm already planning on that, and that's the key thing. Kyren Williams is another guy that we think you should be targeting on these types of teams. Why? Because again, you are trying to win your championship, and Kyren Williams is somebody that really it's baked into what's already baked into Kyren Williams' price is the fact that Blake Corum is there and that they used the 3rd round pick on him, and the fact that Kyren Williams hasn't really been able to stay on the field consistently in the past couple of years, and namely when he was the starter last year when he only played in 12 games. Now, granted, Kyren Williams had a ton of receiving and rushing touchdowns last year in the games he did play. And so what we know about that Rams offense and what we know about the next probably 2 years for Kyren Williams is that as long as he's there and as long as he's healthy, Sean McVay is going to run him.
Yep.
And he's going to get a ton of touchdowns because he's playing in a good offense. Matt Stafford's probably going to be there at least through next year. Right? There's a chance he could retire after this year, but probably not happening. And so on these type of contend reloads, it's nice to get running backs that can be hyper productive, aka 20 plus points per game, while not investing a top 3 round pick in a running back. And Kyren Williams is a perfect example of a guy you can put in one of your running back starting slots in Dynasty and feel really good about it and not feel like you're completely selling out in value. If Kyren Williams was going in the 3rd, he'd be a terrible pick. He'd be an awful pick. Too much volatility there. In the 5th, hey, I'll take Kyren Williams there. I'll also take Deebo Samuel, who's going in the 6th round right now. And again, for a contending team, you're talking about Deebo having the upside to win you leagues. With the rushing upside, he has as much upside to do whatever he wants for your team. But Deebo is particularly nice because he's already going mid-6th, early 7th. And I think if Deebo's going to be relevant for the next 2 years, which I think he will, then you're looking at Deebo probably giving you a really, really good advantage at the flex position on your Dynasty teams because he's a flex level value play right now in Dynasty. He's probably going to give you a really big advantage there for the next couple of years. And then you can go into your reload year and probably sell Deebo at that point, knowing that you got those 2 years of production. But again, you stack guys like Tyreek and Deebo with the upside they have. All 3 of these guys, you notice one thing about them in common, and it's what? They'll have 20, 25 plus point per game upside.
Yep.
And that's what we're targeting with this type of team build and this type of 3-year outlook, honestly.
Yeah, another thing that they have in common too is that they aren't necessarily cheap either, and they do have significant risk tied to them in terms of their value long term. But again, when you're looking at this range, this elite value range, and the archetypes that walk the value line of dual elite QB and wide receiver factory, right? These teams are the ones that have the best cornerstones in the league. They are the ones that have the most value in their league. You can afford some volatility if you're raising your upside in your league so you can go win your league.
That's the point, right?
At some point, you have to turn value into points so that you can win money, right? That's the entire point of Dynasty Fantasy Football, just like regular fantasy football. So it's worth it when you have so many cornerstones on your team. Like, honestly, if you have Marvin Harrison Jr. and he's one of 3 to 4 elite level wide receivers that you have. I'm talking guys that are going in the first 2 rounds of Dynasty. Down tier for Marvin Harrison Jr. and go get A.J. Brown plus a hyper-productive running back.
Yep.
Like, just do it because you can afford the risk of making that move. 2-3 years down the line, you're going to say, I lost that trade. You're also going to have 2 rings on your fingers.
There's nothing better.
Right?
Winning a Dynasty League back-to-back, there's nothing better. You're going to be contend. Don't contend. Win. That's what you should be doing.
Yep.
All right.
So the next range we're going to look at here is kind of towards the right side of the DVM, right? If you're looking at it, Luke, you can put it up on screen. And we're looking at the lower level wide receiver factories. You're looking at well-rounded exclusively, and then your higher end running back heavy archetypes as well. These are the teams where you've got some of your highest upside point scorers, right? All of those guys that we were talking about previously with the elite value teams that you should target, Tyreek Hill, Kyron Williams, and Deebo Samuel. Most of these teams in the contend rebuild section already have those guys. And that's one of the reasons they're going to be contend rebuild instead of reload. This outlook is really focusing on you seriously contending for the next couple of years and really risking potentially a multi-year rebuild your third year because you've most likely given up a significant amount of draft capital. So you're missing your 25 first. A lot of people missing their 26 first as well. Missing a significant number of picks, don't have a ton of young cornerstone assets, but good gosh, you've got a ton of guys that can score points and you have solid productive depth, maybe some productive maybe some productive running back veterans that are just going to score points and help you make a push to the championship this year. And you know that none of them are going to ever be valued to the level that they should be. So you're just going to hold them, you're going to ride with them, and you're going to try to win your league for the next couple of years and then potentially be facing a rebuild. So generally, we're not going to be telling these archetypes to target those high-end expensive assets like A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill. You probably can't afford that because your rookie picks are already gone. Right. So who do we have you target? We have you target those cheaper, affordable, productive assets. Calvin Ridley is a huge one right now. I cannot tell you how many times I have told people to target Calvin Ridley with these archetypes. And you can clip this. You can tell me I'm an idiot 9 months down the road because he loses a ton of value. Well, guess what? He's already worth a second-round pick, so I don't really care. Right? These are the types of guys that you want to take. Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper. Heck, even Devontae Adams is a great target right now for a well-rounded team. He's very affordable. A contend rebuild team. You know what you're getting from Devontae Adams for the next couple of years. His future's in limbo after that. George Kittle, David Njoku, and Evan Ingram. If you can't afford an elite level tight end, but you still want elite level tight end production upside, you go with George Kittle or David Njoku or Evan Ingram. They each have done it the last couple of years. Cheap, productive veteran RBs, man. I already touched on it, but James Conner, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, Zach Moss, Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard. I'd even throw Ramondre Stevenson in there right now because he's being so undervalued. Please take shots on those guys because it's not even a shot to be had. It's like a guided dart throw, and you're like, here, take a third and give me Zach Moss because everyone's in love with Chase Brown right now. Cool, great. Everyone's in love with Trey Benson right now, even though James Conner's going to start this year. Go get him for cheap. Go get him for dirt cheap and go win your league and have the upside to win your league because you know these guys are going to score you points this year in 2024.
Let's look at the next type of team that we have here, and this is going to be on its own because it's very unique, and that's going to be a hard rebuild with the 3-year outlook of rebuild, contend. And we try so hard not to give out 2-year rebuilds. We want every rebuild to be 1-year rebuild because any year that you're not contending in Dynasty is a year you're basically just giving away money, which is stupid. Why would you give away money for free? That's dumb.
Yeah.
And
so a lot of teams submit their rosters, a lot of customers submit their rosters that they've kind of driven into the dirt or they've picked up an orphan and they've bought the team blueprint so that we can help them get out of this multi-year rebuild. So that's usually what we're like.
We're like Dynasty Fantasy Football counselors essentially. And so with this type of team, there's not a specific player or players you should be targeting. There are specific types of assets. Let's go through 3 types of assets here for hard rebuilds. The first one's going to be 2025 first. Why? Because with hard rebuilds, the number one goal is to get value, to maintain value, to increase in value, to get your value to a point where you can spend it on contending assets and contend again, right? So in order to do that, you have to get players that will increase in value. You can take a shot on a player who even has like a 60% chance of increasing in value, a 70% chance. Or you could take a shot on a rookie pick, a 2025 rookie pick, which will get more expensive right after the season starts, number one. You have about 3 weeks until people are going to be like, that's this year. 3 weeks. So get them now.
Yep.
But they're guaranteed to go up in value. So why not? For a hard rebuild, you need guaranteed pieces. You've got to just keep taking these value wins. Same thing with not having, and this is more of a not target, do not have on your roster any running backs that are not rookies. Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks, probably fine. Outside of that, maybe Corum, maybe Lloyd. Outside of that, no, nothing.
Just
no.
People
say,
but Chase Brown, he's a great shot. He could be the next Kyron Williams. Doesn't matter. It's not worth the risk when you can ship him off for a second right now when you know that second's going to increase in value.
People will say, oh, but what about Jahmyr Gibbs? If you are a hard rebuild and you have been assigned an RRC 3-year outlook,
that means number one guy that I'm selling.
That means you need to down tier everywhere. Yep. We did this one time. We talked about CeeDee Lamb. We posted on TikTok, and then we didn't put the context in. People were like, why would you sell CeeDee Lamb? Blah, 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 blah. He's a good rebuild piece, blah, blah, blah. And again, this is talking about a team. If you have an RRC 3-year outlook, you have a crappy, bad team because we only give you 2-year rebuilds if you suck. So when you suck, you need to down tier. And it happens. Like Nathan said, people come to us because they've run their team into the dirt. And the only thing you can do to diversify and to spread out and get more chances at value increasing is to down tier. Because again, if you have Jahmyr Gibbs and he's all you have and you just hold him, Jahmyr Gibbs is probably not going up in value, but what? Maybe a half a round, if that. Yeah. You've got to down tier to somebody like, I mean, I don't know. I don't have any specific examples, but you've got to down tier to guys that are going to increase in value. You've got to down tier to Drake London plus other pieces, upside. Right?
Yeah.
Value upside, things like that. And so don't have any non-rookie running backs on your team. If you're a 2-year no, do not do it. And then you're going to target specifically this month preseason rookie followers. You'll remember in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of those guys. The most notable one was absolutely Garrett Wilson. Absolutely was the number one guy, and he was the number one trade target I had going into week 1. From like the last week of August until the first week of September, I sent a trade offer for Garrett Wilson in every single league. Why? Because he didn't play in the preseason. Everybody was like, oh man, Garrett Wilson, he's not playing. This is bad. He's going to suck. He's not doing anything. And you saw Chris Olave out there and he was doing stuff. And so it's like, well, if Olave's doing stuff, then
Elijah Moore, how's he going to take away from Garrett Wilson?
Elijah Moore, he had his big breakout year, but the year before. And so it's like, what are we going to do?
Jamar Chase dropping balls.
Yep.
Drake May being outplayed.
Yep.
By Joe Milton.
No. Drake May being beat by Joe Milton for the starting quarterback position. Thanks, Colin Cowherd.
Oh my God.
Colin Cowherd is why we exist. We exist to say to you who play Dynasty,
mainstream media sucks.
Just block it out. Block it out. It's idiotic. Even if it doesn't end up happening, I still stand by the fact that it's idiotic. But preseason rookie followers are a great target for hard rebuilds, especially ones with rebuild, contend team archetypes. last type of team.
Then we're going to start with we started
a while
with
ago.
The most specialist team archetype that we always spend a decent amount of time on. That's the 1-year reload. It is by far the most rare archetype that we give out, with maybe the exception of RB heavy, because a lot of people are just scared of running backs right now. But 1-year reload is a tough archetype to give out because it's honestly a shot called, right? It is us counseling you to get ahead of the potential multi-year rebuild that you may be facing heading into the next year, right? So this is like, hey, you've got Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, and Cooper Kupp as your top 3 wide receivers. You could win your league with that, or you could crash and burn and have zero value heading into 2025, and now we're looking at a hard rebuild, right? 1-year reload is aimed at avoiding that terrible situation that no one wants to be in. Let me repeat that. No one should want to be in Dynasty Fantasy Football as a multi-year rebuild. So a 1-year reload, this is repurposing assets. This is repurposing some of your older guys. I know we like a lot of productive veterans, but if you have too many of them and too much risk at really multiple positions with, Kirk Cousins, Evans, Kupp, even Saquon Barkley, Cooper, and don't tell me that we haven't seen it. We have absolutely seen this. George Kittle, right at tight end, all these guys that we really like and think are fine values. If you've got all of those on the same team, we're looking at a situation here, and you need to offload some of these guys. You need to go for Jaden Reed. You need to go for Rashee Rice. You need to go for some other guys that have more value upside. And it doesn't mean that you're punting the year entirely on contending. You could be making some of these moves, and it ends up saving your season, and you actually end up being more competitive than you initially thought, right? So you're going to be, if you're looking at a contend rebuild scale, you're going to be right in the middle for the most part, maybe a little bit to the left, maybe leaning more technically rebuild and not contending as much. But the point is to accumulate value, insulation, target rookie picks, right? Rookie picks are a big thing here. Justin Herbert, if you're short at quarterback, you want to be looking for a safe guy like Justin Herbert that you know you can count on long term and isn't going to have a ton of value fluctuation downward, at least right now, because he's already towards what his floor can be with the contract that he has right now. You've got T. Higgins, who you know is going to get a contract in 2025, has decent value upside. Jackson Smith and Jigba is another big one. It's kind of a shot called, but he's safe enough, has good enough draft capital and team investment that you feel pretty comfortable taking him as a young guy when you can offload an older guy in that range that you're less confident about long term.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so again, that's for every type of Dynasty team. You can make sure that you know your DBC, domain blueprint code, and you also get 3 cells and 6 targets for your team, as well as a ton of other analysis when you get a blueprint 2.0. But you can even get a blueprint 1.0, and you're going to get a ton of targets, and you're going to get some cells as well. They both do the same thing. One is just for the diehards. And so you can get one, flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain when you sign up. You get 30% off any blueprint, but you get a free Blueprint 1.0 when you get the annual Motherflocker tier with code domain. So like I said, use code domain. Well, the links are down low for that. All right, we appreciate you guys. Have fun trading in Dynasty, and we'll see you later.